Okay, let's talk about one of the most brutal, destructive conflicts in the history of Europe, the 30 Years' War. For 3 whole decades, from 1618 to 1648, it just ripped Central Europe to shreds. But what's so wild is how this awful, centuries-old war is directly responsible for the world of independent nations we all live in right now. And that really is the big question, isn't it? How on earth did a 17th century war, this chaotic mess of religion and politics, end up creating the very idea of the modern nation state? To figure that out, we've got to go back to the beginning. So, to understand how the fire started, you first have to look at the tinderbox, the Holy Roman Empire. Believe me, it wasn't really holy, or Roman, or an empire. It was this fragile, fractured place, just waiting for a spark. See, back in 1555, they tried to solve the religious problem with something called the Peace of Augsburg. The rule was pretty simple. Whatever religion your prince was, that's the religion you were. But, and this is a huge but, it only recognized two options, Catholic or Lutheran. It totally ignored Calvinism, which was just exploding in popularity. This created this massive simmering tension right in the heart of Europe. And you can see here, the empire wasn't a country like we think of one today. Not at all. It was this chaotic patchwork of over 300 different states, kingdoms, little duchies, free cities, all technically under one emperor. So you have this incredibly fragmented political map sitting on top of a huge religious divide. It was, well, a recipe for disaster. And then boom, the spark. In 1618, the new guy in charge in Bohemia, Ferdinand II, was a hardline Catholic. He decided to clamp down on the religious freedoms of his Protestant nobles. Their response? They marched up to a castle in Prague and threw two of his officials out of a window. Seriously, it's called the Defenestration of Prague, and it lit the fuse on the whole tinderbox. Yeah, that little revolt in Bohemia, it wasn't about to stay in Bohemia. It quickly spiraled out of control and became a continental free-for-all, pulling in powers from all across Europe. You can really break the war down into 4 big phases. It started as this local thing, but then Denmark jumped in, then Sweden, and then, get this, even Catholic France got involved, siding with the Protestants. That's when you know it stopped being just about religion and became a raw power struggle for control of Europe. And the reality on the ground? It was just grim. Armies back then had to live off the land, which is a nice way of saying these massive forces, full of mercenaries, just plundered, burned, and stole everything in their path to survive, leaving absolute devastation behind them. Just when it looked like the Catholic Imperial forces were unstoppable, a new player entered the game and completely changed the rules. Sweden, led by its military genius of a king, Gustavus Adolphus. You know, the Imperial commanders, they just laughed it off. They saw Sweden as this backwater kingdom up in the frozen north. They figured this king would be crushed just like the Danes were. Oh boy, were they about to get a rude awakening. So how'd they do it? Well, Gustavus Adolphus is called the father of modern warfare for a reason. He ditched the huge, slow, clumsy blocks of soldiers the other guys were using. Instead, he used smaller, more flexible units. And here's the kicker. He created lighter cannons that could be moved around the battlefield, letting him concentrate overwhelming firepower wherever he needed it. It was a total game changer. And the effect? Whoa. It was immediate and absolutely stunning. At the Battle of Brightonfield, the Swedes didn't just win, they completely demolished the unbeatable Imperial army. But all this success came at a terrible price. Just a year later, at Litzen, they won again, but their visionary king, Gustavus Adolphus, was killed in the fighting. It was a massive blow. But you know, all these battles and brilliant tactics, they don't even begin to tell the real story of this war. The suffering inflicted on regular people was on a scale Europe had just never seen before. The true cost was almost unimaginable. 8 million people. Just let that sink in for a second. An estimated 8 million people died, and most of them weren't even soldiers. They died from the starvation and the diseases that the army spread everywhere they went. That was nearly 20% of the entire population of Europe at the time. And in the German lands, where most of the fighting happened, it was even worse. Some regions lost over half their population. Imagine looking around your country and half the people are just gone. That was the reality. And the physical damage? I mean, the numbers are almost impossible to wrap your head around. Tens of thousands of villages and towns just gone. In the German states, about a third of all the towns were literally wiped off the map. It left behind a ruined landscape that took generations to recover from. So after 30 years of just non-stop carnage, everyone was exhausted. The fighting had to stop. And the peace treaty they came up with would end up redefining the map of Europe forever. And this wasn't some king surrendering to another. This was something new. For 4 long years, diplomats from all over the continent gathered in 2 German cities for what we now call the First Modern Peace Conference. It was this huge, complicated effort to build a whole new order for Europe, from the ashes. So what did this New Deal actually do? Well, a few huge things. First, Calvinism finally got official recognition, which solved one of the problems that started the whole mess. Second, the Holy Roman Emperor's power was basically gutted, and out of the chaos, 2 new big players emerged, France and Sweden. But the single most important idea to come out of all this, the absolute game changer, was a little thing called state sovereignty. What it means is that each ruler was now the supreme authority inside their own borders. No emperor and no pope could tell them what to do at home. This was a revolutionary concept. Okay, so this all might sound like dusty old history, right? But I promise you, the rules they came up with back in 1648 directly shaped the world that you and I are living in right now. That idea of a country that you and I have in our heads, with borders and a government that's in charge inside those borders, that comes directly from this moment. The entire international system, the UN, international law, it's all built on this Westphalian foundation of sovereign states. And maybe the biggest shift of all, Westphalia basically ended the era of major religious wars in Europe. After this, countries would go to war for land, for resources, for political power, but not to force their version of Christianity on their neighbors. It was a fundamental change in what nations were willing to kill for. Which kind of leaves us with a big question for today, doesn't it? The world Westphalia created is one of separate independent nations, but in our hyper-connected world with global problems like climate change or pandemics that don't care about borders, does that idea of absolute national sovereignty still make sense? It's definitely something worth thinking about. Thanks for tuning in.